Okay, and I believe we're recording, so welcome everyone, which is just two of us at the moment. Today is Wednesday, May 20th, and this is the office hours for the Image Builder, a subproject of the SIG cluster lifecycle. Just a quick reminder that you should adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube at a later time. So I can drop a link to the agenda in chat, though I suspect everyone has it. And then, what am I doing here? And then we'll see, why did you do that? There we go. And we'll take a look at the agenda. I know we're gonna start off with a demo from Moshe on the latest on the CLI, which I'm very excited about. So let me drop this link in here, see if that works for anybody. And I also see Jason has joined. Welcome, Jason. And all right, so yeah, I mean, not much on the agenda right now. Like I said, we're going to start with a demo from Moshe. I had a question to him related to the CLI about some stuff that I have coming up soon, and then we'll continue from there. So if anybody else out there would like to drop their name as a list of attendees, thank you. And any items that you want to add to the agenda, please feel free. It is light today. And I will stop my screen share and pass it over to Moshe. Stop share. There we go. Done.
I think you need to enable screen sharing for attendees.
Okay, let's see. I can always just make you co-host. Let's see, how do I do that? That is a new one for me. Advanced sharing. Maybe it's under this new security tab. Allow participants to share screen. Done.
Cool. Can I not share my entire desktop?
You say, will it not give you the option to just do a window?
Well,
Hey,
no,
there
I
it
don't
is.
want to. But can you see the above and below?
No, I only see
VS Code.
correct.
Is
Is that not what you want?
Well, it's fine. It's more talking about what it is and then actually running it, but it's
Okay.
fine. So I'll start with the UX. So this is an example manifest for building an Ubuntu image with a specific version of Kubernetes and Containerd on QEMU. And then resizing the input disk. And then that is optional. So this would be your minimal configuration. And then the idea is you can customize the input and the engine. I don't know about the naming, so I've been playing around with image, driver, engine, and it's very confusing even to me. So input on that would be great. So basically we have three different types of engines. So we have a Docker engine, a QEMU engine, and a Packer engine. And that basically describes what is going to do the configuration of the image. And then your input is the image type itself. So not all images are going to work with all images. So like on a Docker engine, you can use a Docker image. On a QEMU engine, you can use a QEMU image. And on a Packer engine, you can use potentially all of those.
So is that where you would say, like, if you're doing the Packer engine, would it be like an ISO or an AMI, depending on what you're building?
Exactly. So this would be like the Packer version. So these should actually, so this would be a Packer engine with, that output is wrong, so with an input of kind AMI. And then these, will still work out where these should go. But this would be how you would then configure the Packer builder. But what it actually does is So you have, for every OS and version, we configure each one of the input types. So on QEMU, you'll get an image. On an ISO, we'll have an ISO. On an AMI, we'll know how to find that AMI. So essentially, adding support for 20 or 4 should, in theory, be just adding another manifest like this and then updating the filters and the locations. So we have one of these for every OS type. So we have a Debian, CentOS, Amazon. So not all of the input types have been defined for all of them, but when we're done, we'll define them all. And then we also have a defaults, which then applies to the engine. So like on VMware, for building a VMX or ISO, you're going to use these, and for using Amazon EBS, you're going to default to these values. So what it does is it takes the defaults values, then the values from the ISO. For example, if you're building on VMware with VMware ISO, it will take the defaults, the ISO, combine it with whatever values you've put in here. So this should actually move up one level and then spit out a Packer configuration. Or Packer build configuration or builder configuration. Then for like or provisioner, I forget which one it is. And then this bit over here is a config admin spec. And what that will do is actually show you. So for example, to do the Packer bit, we merge in all of those defaults into the builders config, and then we generate a bash script from the config admin spec, and then just run that directly using Packer shell commands rather than Ansible. In theory, we can add in the Ansible bit as well, but I think I want to try start minimal and then make as much of that Ansible only for true customization. Do the core bits using Bash, make that the convention, and then Ansible for user customization or Bash, whichever it is. So that's how the Packer would work. So it generates a script, inserts it into the JSON file, and then goes and runs, downloads Packer, runs it, gets the output out and extracts that from the manifest, and will give you back the AMIs that you got.
So that was something I was going to ask you about, which I think you kind of touched on already, was since you've got the config Atom stuff at the top level, right now you're not treating that as optional, correct? Like you said, in theory, you could do the Packer stuff, but I think we had talked about before wanting to have that final provisioning step, or I don't know whether you would call it. It's more configuration than provisioning, but that one be like kind of a configurable backend as well, where it could be config Atom or Packer plus Ansible, that kind of thing.
So at its core, Image Builder is not Kubernetes specific. So config admin has some Kubernetes specific options. And what I'm suggesting is that we take all of the Kubernetes specific items that are in Ansible and remove that from the Ansible portions. So things like package installation, we do it in exactly the same way. we just switch from Ansible to config admin. And then if you want to do anything on top of that, which is besides for install a package, install Kubernetes and Containerd and the system settings and whatever it is, that's when you would plug in your custom Ansible. What I'm wary of is maintaining. So at the moment we have lots and lots of Ansible. That's a lot of it is duplicated. And I'm just concerned that we're going to be managing multiple things that we don't need to.
Can you give me examples of what's duplicated right now? That is something I've definitely worked to reduce. So I can't think of a whole lot off the top of my head.
Well, so you have a file per OS is the one.
Okay, yeah, I guess in my head I'm excluding things that are duplicated because of the way Ansible works. Okay.
Yeah, so it's so one of the advantages with the config admin is that the Kubernetes Containerd portion is fully integrated, tested using Docker. So I have matrix tests set up, and we can discuss whether we move config admin into this repo or not. But essentially, we're testing all of those installation parameters for installing Containerd on Ubuntu, and using, so the system CTLs we can't really do, but a lot of the other things we can do, verify that the packages are all installed, and we kind of make that a separate phase almost. And then you have the image building, which just takes the output of that phase and combines it with what it knows about the different operating systems and providers, and with your options builds an image. Yeah, so like we're not doing any real advanced Ansible. Like most of the Ansible is like, for this OS do that, for that environment do that. And when you look at it from a config admin perspective, so if you wanted to do the same thing here, it is a lot easier. So here you can do nano Ubuntu by AWS, Amazon CLI in AWS, Amazon CLI on AWS and Amazon Linux. So when I'm talking about duplication, a lot of that I'm talking about here is where those tag selectors and do this on that, do this on that, simplifies down to almost nothing with config admin, whereas with Ansible, it's quite a lot. So we have predefined tags for the different operating systems and tags for the cloud providers. And then these two items over here, actually in the background, so there's commands and files, and it's the same thing here, echo hello Amazon, and here so it all compiles down to commands and files. So when I added bash support, it was just taking those files, base64, encoding them, merging them with the commands, and out comes a bash script that will do everything from beginning to end. So if you're on Ubuntu or Debian, it will make sure that you've got the GPG and wget and the keys loaded. And if you're on CentOS, it will add the correct repos, and then do the containerd file download, move it into the correct places, set up the systemd. All of that is kind of baked into here. So these two items will generate a list of packages, commands, files, systemctl to execute. Then your packages, systemctl will then get merged one down further into commands and files. So if we, yeah, so that's kind of my thinking, is to do the core functionality as this. And then there's just the one way of configuring Kubernetes and containerd and the base, and then you can choose how you do everything else. So you want to use Packer, or you want to use Docker, or you want to do some Ansible on top of that. That then is not doing the Kubernetes and containerd stuff. They're doing image customization.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as far as the customization goes, because I know that's becoming a bigger need for people. There's just lots of other people want to be able to add, because there's so many scenarios.
And I also think that a lot of what we're doing in Ansible now isn't actually core, it's customization.
Yeah,
So
we've
like,
had to expose a lot of knobs and things to enable customization for sure.
so I think once we dial it back to just the core, and then say, okay, if you want to customize, here's this Ansible playbook you can add, or that Ansible playbook, and go and mix and match and create your own thing, and then away you go. But the core remains at just Bash. Because you can do Ansible, but I keep coming back to why Ansible is a really bad choice, and that's like, you have this Ansible dependency hell. So which version of Ansible are you using? And then, okay, we can bundle a version of Ansible, but then are we going to keep that version of Ansible up to date and make that? So you get all of these things that, so in my mind, the simplest way of supporting Ansible would be to copy the playbooks and the roles into the resulting image, bootstrap Ansible, install Ansible to minimal state, and then run Ansible locally in that image. And then you no longer reliant on the client side Ansible installation. You're doing it consistently.
So the downside there is that you're increasing the package requirements on the target system at that point as well.
Well, so you could always just drop those packages after the Ansible run as well.
Yeah, but it gets difficult because you know what you installed, you don't necessarily know what came in through dependencies for those as well. So it becomes a little bit harder to clean those up.
So that you can also use like a portable version of Ansible. So I've created exactly that, portable Ansible, which basically bundles Ansible with all of Ansible's dependencies into a deb or RPM that you can then install and uninstall. So it'll give you a specific version of Ansible and a specific version of all of the dependencies that you can then just install, run it using that known Ansible version, and then remove that Ansible portable package, and it doesn't touch anything else.
If the real desire here is reproducibility, would it make more sense to have a container to use per building? And then,
so you can, but then, so you can use a container, but a container has a whole bunch of other problems, like how do you get your AWS credentials into that container? And how do you do that with MFA? So like I've done a lot of this Ansible stuff. So like I've felt this pain of trying to create a reproducible Ansible environment that can do things consistently. It's just yeah. So I created this thing called Ansible Runner that does exactly that. It builds a Docker image. Inside that Docker image, you have a fixed version of Ansible, Python dependencies, a whole bunch of other things. You go Ansible run, and it drops you into a Docker container where you can then run Ansible with all your AWS credentials, SSH credentials, key agent in, and all of that type of thing. But it is it works, but it's something that is non-standard and takes a lot of maintenance effort. So like those repos I have, all of the Ansible and Python versions are out of date, and they've all got vulnerabilities. And then if you go and update them, does this thing still actually work? It becomes like a really major maintenance headache. Whereas if you are running Ansible inside the actual resulting image, you can say, do we want to install Ansible permanently? And if not, we're going to use this specific version of portable Ansible, and then remove it afterwards. And then there's no dependency. Like, I always want to just release a single binary, download the binary, create one YAML file, hit run. Doesn't matter what Linux, what Docker, what AWS credit, and none of that should really matter. It should just work.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. Like, there are definitely pain points that Ansible causes us. At the same time, I want to, the one thing I want to try to avoid is basically rebuilding, configuration management as well. Because there's a lot of things that Ansible gives us for free, like the templating engine and, the facts, and being able to, we're not leveraging this much today, but like the packaging module where it abstracts away which underlying package implementation to use for which OS, that potentially saves us from having to, build and maintain kind of similar types of tooling.
The problem with that is that it nice at first, but then far from nice. So if you look at the packaging abstraction, at the first glance, install a package and then use a different package manager depending on the OS is a nice idea. But when it comes down to it, it doesn't work, because you have these minor changes between different environments in package names, for example. So what do you do then? So now you have two different managing package names in two different places. So on one side, you're doing packages that are common. Then you have all of these customizations for differences. And then what do you do about packages that are not operating system specific, but are cloud specific? So there's no abstraction of that in Ansible itself. And I don't even know if there's a fact for that in Ansible. So like what config admin really is trying to do is not rebuild configuration management. Its express purpose is to get you to a Kubernetes node and to stop. That's it. Everything up until that Kubernetes node. Anything that doesn't meet that goal will get rejected. If you do a PR on that, will get rejected, because it's only designed for that very, very specific purpose. And when we do it with that very, very specific purpose, we can actually test it. Like Ansible, I don't know how many issues are, like there's 40,000 open issues. I think they were going to declare bankruptcy at one point and just close them all. You have all of these modules. There's like 5,000 modules, but how many of them actually have an end-to-end test? how many of them have an end-to-end test across multiple distributions. So those problems cannot be solved with Ansible. They're like inherent to the fact that Ansible is so flexible and easy. It comes with those inherent problems, and config admin is designed to solve those problems for the limited use case, which is Kubernetes node. For a Kubernetes node, can we make sure that we can install Kubernetes on these specific operating systems? And we can confirm that because we can test that. We can test that against all of the different versions, and we can test that in CI very cheaply. So like I have tests running in Circle CI against like 7 different operating systems that will install Kubernetes. So I had it on Kubernetes and Docker, and I just added the container D. And so, and also if we're looking to get this used more broadly, so on things like kind nodes, and Minikube images and all of those types of things, then when you add in the Ansible, it doesn't lean well to that approach. It's not deterministic, if that makes sense.
I think one thing that comes to mind for me for this is kind of having a long, I don't know what I'd call it, an integration cycle, but you know, we've talked about kind of merging this in, starting this kind of experimental, but the long-term goal, I feel like it's going to take a long time to catch up to feature parity, and you know, when we would consider maybe cutting over or that kind of stuff. So I just want to make sure that we keep in mind that once this comes in, it's going to be an iterative process to try it out.
100%. 100%, and like the feature parity would need to come with the testing. So like the only time I would recommend using this and switching from what's there already is when it's backed by backed by PR-based testing that will actually say what it says it does. So the question is, how do we manage both this and the existing stuff, because they are going to have a parallel release cycles. So there might be some major stuff, or might just be minor stuff on the Ansible going forward. So that's a question to you. So how would you like to kind of handle this as an experiment? So in my mind, we do it as an experiment and use the config admin as the base. But as with all good experiments, if that experiment fails and we need to switch it out and use Ansible as the base, like that's why you do an experiment. So I'm happy to kind of do that as well. I just know how difficult it is. So
yeah. I mean, I think two things come to mind as far as maintaining existing stuff. That isn't slowing down from my side at all. That's still going to happen, and there's lots of work and changes coming into all the Ansible-based solution. But as far as bringing this in, like I could see two different things. One would be, you know, comes like merging what you have. It comes into master, but it's kind of segregated by being in its own folder, and it's not really overlapping with any of the stuff that's there already. Or like a little slightly more extreme solution would be, you know, whether we use more of a Git approach and whether it lives on a branch, or we cut something that where it can live independently until we want to bring it into master. I don't know what people's you know, pros and cons for both, but if it's, when I think of it as just an experiment, you know, unless we're pointing to it, and sorry, I don't mean to belittle it by saying just an experiment. I don't consider it just an experiment. It's a big deal. And I do think this is, you know, we want we want an awesome CLI for this. So poor choice of words there. But what I mean is, unless we've got documentation that is at, you know, at the very beginning and telling people to use it, most people aren't going to stumble on it by chance and start playing with it. So I don't think there's much of a danger of people trying something that isn't ready for prime time. So I don't know, does anybody else have any thoughts on whether or not this would be okay to pull into master and iterate on it, or if we want to keep it on a branch? Sounds like no. I mean, I'm fine with it being in master, depending on what the folder structure is, which I think the last push I saw on it was, the last commit was, unless something happened in the last day or two, it was a couple days ago, we lost Jason. But it was off in its own area, which I think is fine.
So at the moment, it isn't really, but I can restructure it to be in its own area.
Well, I mean, I know
Or
there's
just its own folder, like can stick it under like an experiments folder, whatever.
Yeah, but I know there's an existing command folder and there's some stuff in there, but I've never quite been clear on what that's used for.
It was just the stubs really of kind of the user experience. So
yeah, so I feel like it's not supplanting something that's already there, because I don't think it's used. But a relevant question that I had you here, which is something I put on the agenda, was I mentioned maybe about a month ago, though I don't remember if you were, maybe it was 6 weeks ago. It might have been the time that you were out, Moshe, but I have also like a CLI based tool that is OVA specific that I want to start bringing in here. And it kind of replaces a bunch of the Python scripts that we have for building the OVA and dealing with metadata and stuff like that. And I'm not sure whether that should live in, at the top level and be part of your tool, whether it's a subcommand, or if it should be specific down in the cluster API folder, because then we've got multiple Go-based CLIs. And I don't want to, I'm not sure how to structure that the best way for the project.
So what is your Go tool do again?
Well, it doesn't, you haven't seen it, it doesn't exist, but this would be, right now there's a bunch of Python scripts in this hack directory that says build OVA, and it's what creates the XML metadata, and it tars up the things that go into the OVA, the VMDK file, a manifest file, an OVF file.
So there's it's like OVF tool.
Yes, but way more source. Specialized. And when I mentioned this before, you were the one who pointed me to a library called GoOVA, I think. And I took a look at that. Is also not quite what I need. And I could do what I need by enhancing the Python scripts in a lot of ways, but I'd rather it be Go based. One, so that maybe it would end up in this Uber image builder CLI. Also, so that it could potentially, but not start off as something that had some library functions that could be vendored by external tools. But I don't know where to put it right now, if it should just live on its own, or if I should try to merge it with your stuff.
So I definitely think you should merge it with my stuff, not as a subcommand, but as a converter. So there's this idea of inputs and outputs. So the input is what I'm taking in, and I'm going to do something with it. So if I remove everything else and say I'm going to take in a VMDK, and my engine is going to be null, for example. So I'm not doing any configuration. So I'll use the existing Packer plus Ansible, generate a VMDK, and then I can pipe that into this tool and then do OVA properties and use, I don't know what else you need in there.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I'm going with it, in that the functionality that I need that I don't have today is way finer grained customization of what goes into the OVF metadata. Being able to change properties that are in there, being able to override ones that are already there, and being to add lots of new ones that aren't in there at all. Having sane defaults if it doesn't exist, but being able to customize lots of stuff.
Yeah, so I definitely think merge it in here. So once I get the first iteration in, it should be a very so there's a converters framework,
Perfect.
which basically from one image type to another image type, define the function and you're done type of thing, and then just do your Go code.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
and then you piggyback off of this schema. And then once we ready to not experiment, then you switch the engine to something else, to Packer or QEMU, and then your input goes from VMDK to ISO or disk or whatever it is.
Right.
And you do end to end, and then you can even go the one step further and say, I want to do it to a VM, and it's going to be in this vCenter with this folder, and I want to do it to AMI and in this region, type of thing. So you have this chain that gives you end-to-end building of the image. Just in terms of the defaults and the customization, one thing I did notice was the EULA on the OVA,
Mm-hmm.
the VMware EULA. So I think we need to make it a Kubernetes EULA, and same for like the TKG stuff. Make that as a custom spec that you would then bolt on top of the image builder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I mean, we should definitely file an issue because I could definitely see that the the upstream EULA should probably not be a VMware one. It did get pulled into its separate into a separate .txt file a while ago.
Yeah,
So you can change it.
change it.
It's not configurable, but yeah, when you meaning there's nothing you can do right now to change it without having to change some code. It's configurable, but it's hard coded, so to speak. But the script that embeds that EULA takes the EULA as an argument, so you could point it to a different one. For the downstream stuff, for the TKG one, it's going to use what's there today. It's the right one. But for upstream Kubernetes community stuff, I could certainly see that. And that was just kind of fallout from what was there to begin with.
Yeah, no, I'm
But
just
I hear you.
saying. So, just another thing I want to point out here is this is using a custom version of Go YAML that supports templating inside YAML. So you'll see the bash template in env. So when we parse this out, we'll automatically pull out environment variables and let you run templating inline as well. So this is, for example, generating the AMI name using a Go template. And you could then extend that out to be, so I was going to do a Go Getter one as well. And then it could be vmware.com eula.text type of thing. So when you're configuring it for your environment, then pulling in these extra files or reading them from disk. So if you're using the Go template to read it from disk, it would be something like file, read file.
Right.
Text.
Okay.
So, like, there's lots of other templating solutions, but I actually found that this was the only YAML native way of doing it, where you're not. There's the YTT as well, but I found that not very usable as a library. So this is fully valid YAML, and comments are comments, and these YAML tags are YAML tags.
Okay.
So that's another advantage of using this to configure it, is that the configuration of whatever you're doing becomes a lot easier.
Okay. Well, I guess to move this forward, what do you need in the short term? You know, is it ready for another review on the PR? I didn't get any other feedback on, you know, masters versus branches or stuff, but
so maybe I should just create a V2 folder in master and put all of this in there.
Do you even think it should be V2? We're tagged 0.1.
Or V1.
Yeah, I don't know where the right place is, but I would like you to be able to get it in there so we can start to do the iteration, start to shake out the experimentation, see whether config admin is going to work, whether or not we, just have a place where we can start getting the ball rolling here, especially since I would like to add some stuff to it.
So what you're actually talking about is what I wanted to ask you to help on, was getting rid of the OVF tool dependency.
Yeah, I mean, when you're building, it depends on the build. There is no, when you're building locally, there is no OVF tool dependency. If you're using ESX, there is. And I haven't, off the top of my head, I'm not sure if there is when you use vCenter or not.
So I have a pipeline that goes QEMU to QEMU, so it runs on a disk image, then uses QEMU to convert the disk image to VMDK, and then I use OVF tool to create an OVA out of the VMDK.
Okay, well, there is an existing Python script where if you've got a VMDK, you don't need OVF tool. It'll do all the rest for it.
Because OVF tool, like, I don't mind it, but it's behind a license wall, which is problematic from a CI perspective.
Okay. But yeah, the existing Python script, once you have a VMDK, you can just run the Python script.
And it'll do it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, right now
wait for your Golang.
Yeah, that too. The other things that Python script is looking for is it does assume that the VMDK came from the Packer build, so it's looking for some metadata that exists in a JSON file that Packer spits out. But that can get there any way you want it to get there to unblock you. It's just metadata. But okay. But yeah, I mean, I want to be able to iterate on this. So
let me push it to a V1 folder.
Okay.
And then I'll open a new PR to the V1 folder, and I'll remove all of the other existing Go code in there.
Okay. Yeah, and when that comes out, I'll probably lean on Jason as well. I want him to take a look. I know he's got some well-informed opinions on this.
While I have you, I've got this interesting Golang question. So I have an interface and an interface, and I want to merge from the one interface into the other. So I want to get a pointer to a struct and a struct, or a pointer to a struct and an interface. And I have not found a way of doing it other than hard coding it. Are you aware of another way of doing it?
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to look at it a little bit more in depth. I haven't had to do anything like that directly, but I'm happy to look at it.
Because it just looks, it works, but it's just ugly.
Okay.
You're just talking about like a deep copy?
Yeah, so this merge will do a deep copy, but it needs a struct as an input, not an interface. If you give it an interface, it doesn't do anything. So you actually have to cast it to the type, and then feed it in, and then it will work. If you don't cast it, then it doesn't know what fields to iterate over.
Yeah, I don't see how you would do that on a interface unless the interface had some defined method in it that gave you gave you the struct. Because yeah, otherwise I don't see how it's going to know. You can't know what the struct underneath it is.
Like I come from a Java world, and in the Java world, that's like easy peasy.
I had a question about the templating that you mentioned
Yep,
earlier.
yep.
So you said specifically that YTT didn't work particularly well as a library. In the cluster API group, they are currently implementing YTT as a library into the next version of cluster.ctl. So that you might want to revisit
Look
the
at that.
usability of YTT as a library.
Yeah, I can do that.
Do you know, Robert, whether they've said if there's any timeline on that? Like, is it imminent or is it a big
They're
deal?
testing it now.
Okay.
I mean, well, that's not good. They're testing the proposal.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but,
Thanks for bringing
the
that up because that thought crossed my mind. I was like, I think they're working on that. Okay.
So,
if
like, I
anything,
think,
it would be nice to have a similar templating tool across the tools, or at least
both.
the option for it. The proposal is currently doing it as a plug-in capability, right? So you don't have to use that as a templating engine. You essentially pass it as a parameter saying do templating with YTT, so that it keeps the door open for other potential templating tools.
Yeah. So the reason why I don't like that approach is it doesn't deal with the YAML as a true YAML file. So like looping and things like that, it becomes difficult to validate the input.
Well, if the cluster API stuff is a proposal right now and you haven't taken a look at it, Moshe, maybe that would be a
Yeah,
valuable place to give some feedback.
yeah, I can do that.
I don't have a link to it. It's not something I've looked into or anything,
So
but
I did look at it briefly. I'll maybe just put a comment there. Not that I'm opposed to, like, if there's code that I can copy and paste and just get the YAML passing with YTT, why not?
Yeah, I threw the proposal I threw the KEP into the chat. If you get a chance to take another look at it.
Okay, we'll do.
okay, great. If at all possible, I'd like to get out of here 5 or 6 minutes early because I have to gotta go pick up my kids. But I have one other thing on the agenda that I'd like to ask you about, Moshe, which was basically Justin's PR about his container-based build. He made the changes that we discussed about a month ago. Wow, time flies. It's been 4 weeks. I just wanted to see if you
So
had any objections to that merging.
no, I don't have any objections to it. I think it can merge.
Okay, because yeah, it's also kind of segregated in its own area. Okay, because
Yeah,
I looked through it again. He made the changes that you suggested, and so I'm just going to give it an LGTM, and then it'll go in.
cool.
Okay.
And just be grateful that you have kids to pick up and they're not at home.
Yeah, I mean, not to get to too many personal details, but yeah, it's basically shuttling them back and forth between me and my ex-wife. So it depends on which home they're
How
at
you
the
look at
moment,
it.
all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Cool.
okay.
Cheers.
Yeah, and anything else? I'm happy. I know you joined, Robert. Anything else that you want to add or throw on the agenda for next time or anything?
No, my air gap thing, it's done. I just haven't tested it
Okay.
with non-air gapped builds, right? Just to make sure that none of those variables being in there breaks anything. But I rebased it, and the only other thing is that one of the things in that pull request is it starts outputting a Packer manifest in JSON format. It might make sense to revisit some of the other Packer builders and see if we could do that uniformly across the various image builders. Simply because in the wild, I've seen people doing things like parsing the the output to the CLI, but Packer has the ability to, output a properly formatted
Manifest.
JSON file. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be happy to give it another look here. And yeah, I mean, as far as creating a much nicer Packer manifest, I'd always kind of pictured doing that as part of the CLI stuff that Moshe is kicking off here.
So this CLI will actually do that. So it will create the builder and then use the manifest and then read out the data from the manifest after the Packer build is done, and then return that as your output image. So which
Awesome.
you can then
Yeah, the CLI sounds really good. I joined a little late, but I sort of glossed that this addresses my biggest pain point, which is that Packer is not really designed to be used the way we're using Packer.
Agreed.
Yeah. Cool.
You're not alone. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Cool. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.